Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show. Today, we're going to South Africa, and I'm very, very excited because we are having a powerhouse today. And we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, which is to get your voice, out and be able to tell your story. We all have a story. We all have something to say, but it's sometimes difficult to articulate it. So we're going to see, with my guests, what are the opportunities, what are the tools, what are the processes that exist to be able to do that. So who is the guest today? I'm going to just, introduce her briefly, and she'll get the opportunity to introduce herself, with more detail. My guest today is Zoya Mabuto, and she is a public powerhouse, like I said, public speaker and also facilitator and coach in public speaking and leadership development. And she's been two-time Southern African Toastmasters Champion. She's a TED speaker, and she's the managing director of Zoya Speaks, and she will introduce to us today one of their flagship program, how they're helping, their clients and customers get their voice back and develop, their leadership as well. So just come in, let us know where you're watching from. And we really welcome, your insight. And if you have any question, please, put it in the comment, and we will be more than happy to have an interaction session with you. And I know that Zoya will also be happy to interact with you. So let's start. I'm going to bring her now, and we will get this exciting conversation going. So don't go anywhere. We will start the conversation with Zoya. Another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show, the show that is brought to you by the Birai Telekima Global Leadership Organization.
Real is important is if you just look at the word compassion, when it's behavior, it's something that can be learned, and it is something that we can embody through habits and through our daily actions.
To get this idea that if we interject this wisdom intentionally, I call them needle movers. It's the needle mover that's missing.
Don't deprive the world of your greatness. Please. Don't do that anymore. Dare to excel, dare to be sexy, dare to be you, dare to be the best version of yourself. Impact yourself positively, and from there impact others. And you are not alone.
So welcome, Zoya, to the Greatness Engineering Hour show. It is a pleasure to have you and to talk about an important subject because, as we know, telling our story is the backbone of who we are, and it's a very important process and phase of our life. But before we get, to this stage, to start the conversation, can you, introduce yourself to the audience? Let us know who you are and any important thing that we need to know about you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's afternoon in South Africa. I'm not sure what time zone it is in different parts of the world, but certainly hello, Mireille. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this amazing show. Just in terms of who Zoya is, I am a South African based in South Africa, living in South Africa. I often get quite poetic and I say things like, I am fire. I'm somebody who's very energetic and quite passionate. And I am drawn to people. I have a love for people, and my work really is premised around how I can assist people to navigate the distance between where they are and where they'd like to be. I'm passionate about my continent, Africa. And so all the work I do is really geared towards saying, how do we create an African continent on the one hand, where we do own the power of our voices and share our amazing stories amongst ourselves and certainly with the rest of the globe. And then, of course, I'm an advocate for women and for women empowerment in particular, because I've come to appreciate the rareness that women bring to the table. And so I'm an advocate for gender parity, for inclusion, for diversity, as it relates to that. So this is who I am in a nutshell. I run a business called Zoya Speaks. I started the business in 2015. This is after I had dropped out of corporate. I felt that I wasn't making the impact in corporate I had hoped to make. And so I left corporate and I started Zoya Speaks. And it's interesting because now I go back and I do work in corporates, assisting corporates, individuals in corporates as well as teams.
Mm-hmm. And I want to come back to this transition from corporate to starting your own organization. What was it like, to transition from an environment where you didn't have your voice, you couldn't really progress the way you wanted, to a completely new venture, and where you know exactly what you want to do, but nothing is established. So what was the feelings, the challenges, and the mindset at that time?
I mean, it's a great question, and I'm going to do what I do best, which is to couch it in a story. And basically, it goes all the way back to when I find myself in corporate and being clear from the onset that perhaps this is not the place where I am going to make an impact. And the reason was because I'm somebody who's quite vocal. I'm the type who raises their hand before they've said, are there any questions? Because I'm just that way. I'm inquisitive, I'm curious, I pick at things in order to understand them. And I realized, from the get-go that perhaps this wasn't how people did things in corporate. And if you will appreciate, I was much younger at the time. I step in and I'm this woman, I'm a female. And so, a lot of eyebrows would go up. It would be, oh, it's Zoya again, wanting to challenge, etc. So it became clear to me from quite early on that perhaps this was not the place where I was going to make impact. But of course, what we do is we convince ourselves that things will change. And I spent 10 years in corporate wrestling with myself, with why this was such a difficult place for me to navigate. And it took a particular event. 10 years after I'd been in corporate, the company I was working for hosted an event. And it was buzzing. It was a beautiful event. And I just remember the MC asking, is there anybody with a question? And I remember sitting in the audience feeling like I've got a question, but something had happened to me over the course of that 10 years. I was no longer that person who raised their hand before they even asked. I'd become somebody who thought about raising her hand, who wanted to raise her hand, but for some reason, self-doubt and a lowered self-esteem, had taken over. And I reflected on that. I thought, hey man, who is this? Who have you become? And it was in reflecting on that where I thought, no, something's got to change. And really, I think that experience where I watched myself become someone who I couldn't even identify anymore caused me to go, I've got to change something. And that became what assisted me to really be resolute in saying, I'm stepping out of this and I'm going to make sure that whatever I do, contributes to people not going through what I've experienced. And so that's really in a nutshell, I think, what happened.
Yeah, and it's difficult. Those transitions are very difficult. There's a lot of fear happening because we go from yes. An environment where we're not comfortable, but an environment that we know, to the unknown. So there's quite a lot of questions that we are asking ourselves. So how did you navigate, your journey to build, what you have right now? What were the key steps, if I can ask, to build from zero, basically starting from scratch to where you are now, actually on the other side, helping people who stayed in corporate to give them their voice?
So maybe let me just connect to the point you made about how when we live or when we leave the comfort zone, it's always going to be uncomfortable. Corporate had a beautiful way of keeping us there, right? You've got the benefits, your medical age in South Africa, we call it, all sorts of things that for the most part will keep you in this very comfortable place, but where you're not, becoming the best version of yourself. And so it was uncomfortable. However, I think the discomfort for me was, it was a discomfort I could handle because I knew that I didn't want to keep feeling the way I was feeling in corporate. And so for me, the negotiation wasn't a difficult one. I would rather be uncomfortable than be so miserable and feel like I've forgotten who I am. I don't know who I am. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second is that I had already, whilst in corporate, started to think about an exit plan of sorts. But at the time, this thing of being a public speaker or a professional speaker, particularly in South Africa, it wasn't a thing. And so, I went back and forth going, I know that I have this ability to make impact from the platform. I know this. I've been doing this since I was a young girl. I was born to do this, But could I make a career out of this? And so for me, it really was, it was having to navigate those conversations. And then I took a couple of steps. And the steps involved joining Toastmasters. So when you introduced me, you said, I am a Southern African public speaking Toastmasters champion. And so I joined Toastmasters in the year 2012. And I think for me, this was really a turning point because I remembered, I stood on a platform, I shared a message, and just something in my memory said to me, this is where you're supposed to be. And so that was part of the journey. And then, of course, I formally left corporate. And I had to start the business Zoya Speaks. And let me tell you that, being an entrepreneur is something else. You step into market and you think, I've got this amazing idea. I can't wait. You're convinced that it's the best thing and everybody needs it. And then the market gives you feedback that says, this is not what we're looking for. And you actually almost have to have that willingness to go back and to say, what do I need to tweak? What do I need to adjust? What's the research I need to do to enable me to get closer to understanding what the market I want to service needs and wants? What's the problem I want to solve? And so, it was a process of having to go through that as a realization. And that hit me incredibly hard. It sobered me up very much, in the early part of the business starting. But I think if I were to take you through the steps, it was one that being resolute in the fact that I wanted things to change. I was clear. There was no confusion there. And then I started to take the steps that were in alignment with where I wanted to go, even though I didn't have certainty of where exactly that would take me. It was enough to do a Toastmasters. I entered a very random TED competition. They had a competition called The Young, the Wise, the Undiscovered. And I applied and I said, I have a story to tell. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. But the TED platform, it connected with me, this idea of, a platform that allows us to spread our ideas and to amplify them to a global audience. And so I sent in an application. They came back to me and said, Absolutely, yes. We'd love to have you take part. And I'll be honest with you, it threw me off completely. I never thought they'd say yes. And yes, they did say. And so that was one of the other things, I think, where I continued to push myself beyond the comfort zone, and it started to pay off bit by bit. Even though, to your point, I stepped into it holding a bit of that fear.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? When you have clarity and your alignment, how the thing that you can do. But before reaching this step, there's just so much doubt, so much fear, and just like it said, it's important to feel the fear, but do it anyway because you have the clarity. So we're gonna have yes.
Can I jump in there to say that sometimes the doubt and the confusion can also come from the external noise. And I think this is an important thing, because one of the things we talk about in the Be Heard program is the importance of listening to yourself, really tuning out the noise. And I think for me, at some point I said, no more listening to the outside noise. I am clear in my heart of hearts what it is that I want to do. The external noise sounded like people saying to me, what are you going to do? What do you mean you're leaving the comfort of a 9 to 5 for, I don't know, I'm not sure. What about, and at the time I had just had my first child. What about this child and this child's future? What will your husband say? And so it was all of that external noise that I think for me contributed in some shape or form to those feelings of self-doubt, those feelings of, is this the right move or not? But the minute I said, just tune into yourself, bring it back to you, and just tune into yourself and just block out some of that external noise. What's talking to you from deep inside of you? And I think for me, when that happened, the shift it made things a lot easier. There was no need to entertain the self-doubt anymore, because the clarity came from deep within.
Fantastic, and that's what it is. It's about you first, and sometimes we give priority to what people are saying, what people want us to do, and sometimes it's actually people who are close to us, people that we love. So it becomes really difficult to know, okay, what's best for me. Those people love me. If they're saying that, maybe it's true. So we start to be in a very a difficult situation. But like you said, we have to listen to ourselves and take the step that is important for us, for the alignment with our purpose. So we're gonna have a break, and I think what I want to do is talk about your program, Be Heard. Understand what it is all about, and how you helping people in corporate, but also in their personal space to own their voice and to step into their power. So for those listening, my guest today is Zoya Mabuto. She's based in South Africa, and like I said, she's a powerhouse, a speaker, TED speaker, champion, Toastmaster champion, and she's also helping people in their personal development and also organization as well. So don't go anywhere. We will have a short break, and I will be back with Zoya to continue this very energetic conversation. So see you in a few minutes. So since we're talking about self-confidence, self-esteem, Unshakable Faith is coming out on the 25th of June. I'm one of the co-author based on different stories of triumph, building on our own faith. So watch out for this book. But today it's all about Zoa, and Zoa is the managing director of Zola Speaks. And there is a flagship program that they use to help people to tell their story, to own their power, and to own the power of their voice, because I think that's what we're talking about today. So what is Be Heard, Zoa? Can you explain to us, give us a little bit more detail on that?
Okay, so thank you so much. So Be Heard, as you've mentioned, is our flagship program at Zoya Speaks. I spoke to the fact that when I started Zoya Speaks, I had bold ideas about what it is that I was going to talk to people about, and the market told me something very different. What the market told me is that on the one hand, they struggle when it comes to expressing themselves. So they are needing assistance in terms of standing up and confidently expressing their views. They're struggling in terms of telling their stories. But additional to that, they said, but we also struggle with things like the imposter syndrome. We struggle with things like self-doubt and self-confidence. We struggle with things like believing that we are worthy of standing up to share the story in the first place. And so the Be Heard program then became our response to that feedback that we received. And basically what we do is we marry leadership development skills with public speaking, very practical public speaking tools, to arrive at a program that we feel is holistic, addresses issues that show up on the surface, and then do the work of asking the questions of what's not showing up on the surface. How do we then take a bit of a deep dive into the things that may not show up, but that contribute to how you show up? So that's what the Be Heard program is. It's a program that we've created for anyone and everyone. And so we've, piloted the program with groups of women. We've piloted it in corporate setups, with diverse groups. And we really have received the feedback to say that it connects with people, and it certainly does assist them in terms of uncovering the power of their voice and then developing and sharing those stories that we all have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I really wanted to do is what is the response, because obviously you're touching something that is very sensitive, and I know that sometime in Africa our stories are very precious. We don't always want to share them with anybody. So what is the response, and what is the research actually saying about the tools and the resources that you are using?
So maybe let me start with the research and the approach that we used. So we actually went into market and conducted extensive research. So we had focus groups, we sent out surveys, we had interviews, with some people. And really for us, it was to surface, one, do you think being heard is important? And it feels like an obvious, but some people said, no, not really to me. But for the most part, more than 90% of the people who took part gave us the feedback that it mattered to them. But for us, what was interesting was the follow-on feedback that over 60% of those people felt that they were unheard, both in their personal and their professional lives. And so we started to interrogate further, and we asked the question, why is this so? What are some of the factors that contribute to you feeling unheard? And we surfaced two types of things. One was the internal, we'll call it, or the internal or the inward issues. And so things like I'm not heard, because I'm unable to clearly articulate what is in my head and allow that to translate into what I say, how I communicate. So that was the one. Another one was in sort of the inward, I'm dealing with these issues around self-confidence. I've got challenges in terms of self-esteem. I have a heightened, imposter. I've got this imposter syndrome. So those were some of the things we surfaced, which were more inward-facing or focused. And then we also surfaced, and this was an interesting one, that sometimes the factors that contribute to people feeling as though they're not heard, sometimes these factors are external. So they're outward facing or external. And these were things like biases. So I am a woman leading a team. When I stand up to engage with the team, I can see people switch off. I can see that they don't take me seriously. And so biases around race, gender, age was a big one as well. In African communities, I'm a young girl. In my family, I grew up where children are not, children are, what is it, seen but not heard. So we see you, but you don't ever raise your voice at all. And so we surfaced some of those as well. Additional to this, when we then looked into the corporate space, what we surfaced there is that some corporate cultures promote what we describe as cultures of fear and silence. And so we don't typically have corporate cultures that allow us to speak freely and openly, without there being some kind of recourse or repercussion. So this is what some of the research surfaced. And then it was about saying, what are the ways in which we can assist people to navigate some of these? So if we look at the inward issues, it was about saying, how do we, do some deep personal work with individuals to assist them to become more self-aware, and then by extension, to extend that to others. So I deepen, my awareness of myself, and then by extension, it allows me to have better understanding of the way other people show up. So doing that work on myself, building that self-awareness, really interrogating those blind spots. A little bit earlier, I was saying to you that sometimes people come in and they have misdiagnosed the issue. And that's because people, don't always have line of sight of their own blind spots. So we also surface some of your own blind spots around this concept. Is it really about other people, or are there areas that you can improve within yourself? And so we do work around that. And then when we're talking to some of the external issues, one of the things I love is to talk about this concept of psychological safety. And it's become quite a buzzword in leadership development circles. But people are always so grateful when I say to them that, the experience of public speaking is harrowing for every single one of us. I've been standing on platforms since I was 8 years old. But every time I have to step up onto a platform, there's those little bitty nerves still. And when I explain to them, what's happening, and I say to them, what's actually happening here is that your brain is scanning the environment, and it's saying this thing of speaking, of exposing my thinking, of having these eyes look at me. It's a scary thing. It's a scary thing for every single one of us. And sometimes when we reduce it to that level and we make it something that is scary for all of us, people then are able to feel like, okay, I'm not weird, I'm not strange. This is something that's pretty normal. So we talk about how do you then build that psychological safety that allows you to manage those feelings of I'm threatened, those feelings of I am not safe. And then we give a couple of, exercises ranging from breathing to visualization, to meditative exercises, to mindfulness practices that can assist us to really regulate our state when it comes to public speaking. So I'll touch on those for now, but, we'll explore further as we engage.
And that's that's important. There's so many layers, and we all have different different blockages, different challenges. So and from what you said, yes, there are tools, but they're not just fix and tailor to everybody, because it depends of your experience. It depends of a lot of things where you have evolved. And I still remember myself, when I got married, I did my traditional wedding. So the whole planning was done by my family. And then each time I wanted to talk, and then in front of the elders, they're like, okay, you don't have any right here. We are the one, doing all of this. So no voice, nothing. So sometimes the culture is just so strong that it's difficult for you to actually have a voice. And which lead me to the corporation, the corporation. Obviously, as at the individual level, it might be a little bit easier, but then when you have a corporation with a strong culture and a culture that is going for years, how do you manage that? How do you manage people who can't actually express themselves inside this corporation and make themselves heard?
I mean, that's a very difficult question, because I think, just listening to you, you're saying that, a culture has been built over years, that culture has been entrenched over a period of time. And so the culture starts to show up, not just in, how we do meetings, but in every single part or aspect of the organization. And so, the work of changing an organizational culture is incredibly difficult work. But that being said, we still say to people, the reality is that we have to start somewhere. And so typically what we do on the Be Heard program is to say, we're going to empower you with the skills around how you can do this for yourself. So you're in a meeting, let's recognize the behaviors that can cause you to feel unsafe first and foremost. So I am speaking, somebody interrupts me, that can cause me to feel unsafe. I'm about to present. I know that this is a difficult audience who like to challenge for the sake of it. They're all about status and entrenching their power. This could make me feel unsafe. So one, we do a bit of work to say, let's understand instances, where you could feel threatened, that may feel unsafe. And then we say, how do we empower you with things you can do practically in the moment, as well as kind of, ongoing practice for yourself to respond to it. We're not trying to say that the Be Heard program is changing, organizational cultures in their entirety, but we're empowering the individual. And then we take it a step further and we say, if you want to have that safety, then, it seeks to reason that you want to be somebody who creates that for somebody else. And I think this is the power. That we then say, in what instances are you the person who causes somebody else to feel unsafe? And so we bring up some of the behaviors that people may be unconsciously, doing that perpetuate the very thing that they are trying to also address. So those are some of the ways in which we try to address what we find to be rigid, corporate cultures that promote certain ways of showing up. It's difficult, Mireille. It's very difficult. And the feedback we actually received we just finished a program with a group of ladies, and the feedback they gave me was, Zoya, is it possible for us to have Be Heard refresher courses? And this is because, she described it. She said, it feels like I go back into that jungle and I'm all alone and I'm empowered with these tools, but I'm using them largely by myself. And I need to have a tribe or a community where I can go back and almost kind of just, be anchored in something. And so we took that as feedback, because the reality is that we aren't in those organizations. And most times our customers end up going back into these very toxic spaces. So, we've taken the feedback to heart, and we're saying, what does it look like to create, a gym of sorts, where you have mental and emotional fitness, and you go to gym as if you would a normal gym, and we equip you, with the skills certainly, but you bolster that knowledge, you reinforce it in a safe space, and then you're able to take it out and to practice it. So it's about building a community of practice, I think, is what I'm saying. And allowing the Be Heard program, I think, to evolve, to also do something to that effect. But it's challenging. Organizations are hugely challenging. I once worked for a management consulting firm, and we did a turnaround strategy. We had to employ a turnaround strategy for the Department of Home Affairs many years back. And I can tell you that even with the level of expertise that was brought to the table, trying to bring about a culture change is a lot of work. It requires buy-in and commitment from, the senior leadership, etc. And then it needs to cascade into every other part of the organization. And sadly, often the interventions are not sustainable.
And I like, the proposal of your client, because it's just like everything, you need to keep, doing it. You need to keep nurturing it, because otherwise you go back to the, to your habits. And it's the same with diet, it's the same with exercise, it's the same with, everything that we do, even learning. We have to still, nurture ourselves so that we can continue to have the right, the right habits. So let's say hi to, I've seen some comments here. So Stefan is here, is watching from Cote d'Ivoire, and we have Tebelo. Tebelo, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We're waiting for your inside. There's a congratulation, but no name. So please let us know who you are and where you're watching from. And then we have Rebecca. Rebecca is watching. I don't know from where, but she's the founder of Confident Woman, Confident Me here. So we will have another break, and we will be back to continue to learn more about your work, the program, and how it's impacting not only the clients and the organization that you're working with, but also the community and South Africa and the region in a way. So don't go anywhere. We are going to be back with Zoa, and we're talking about owning our voice and sharing our story. So see you in few minutes. So we are back. We are back with Zoa, but just wanted to mention that today is episode 178, and we had about more than 220 guests since we started in 2018, and I'm happy that we're making a difference and we're reaching out to people around the world and bringing champions just like yourself to share their knowledge and their strategies for people to understand the greatness that they have, and most importantly step into their greatness and engineer greatness wherever they are. So just to come back to you, and there's one question that I wanted to ask you. Obviously, I mean, you mentioned that it's still a very difficult process to change the culture, to change how people behave, so that they can be freely confident to share their story, to own their voices. So as we venture into this digital world, and especially fast-paced world where everybody wants to be visible, there's a lot of competition. What do you think are the key thing that we should focus on going forward as far as communication is concerned, and people really owning their voice and making themselves heard?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. And I'm going to start with where we are at in terms of the Be Heard program. So one of the things we say is you have a story to tell. Okay, that's the first thing. And part of uncovering or discovering what that story is by you just doing a little bit of research on yourself. So we do an activity where we get people to dig deep into kind of what is my name, what does it mean, who gave me my name, etc. It's one of the activities we do as part of storytelling. And that's really, I think, to bring people closer to the fact that, one, we all have a story to tell. So every single one of us has a story to tell. And it can start with something as simple as your name. So when we step onto these platforms, I always say to people, step into the room as if you're somebody with a story to tell. And I do a little activity, and I call it filling the empty space. And I say, very often we're told this is what you must leave at the door, but no one tells us what to bring into the room. So we're told, leave the troubles at the door, leave the baggage at the door. So what do you bring in if you've left everything at the door? And so part of what I say then is you've got to become conscious about how you are rooted in your story, and then how do you bring that into, all of the engagement. So one of the things you said to me was it's an energized or energetic conversation. I am deliberate about bringing a certain kind of energy into all my interactions. It's part of my brand promise. It's part of the story of who I am. So that's the first thing. Root yourself in the story of who you are. That's the very first thing, because then you're grounded. No matter where you are, no matter who's in the room, something is grounding you. The second is it's really to be purposeful about how you step into an empty space. I referenced the work of Peter Brook here, and he's a theater practitioner. And he says that, if a space does not have you in it, right? Let's imagine you're standing out of a space, you're looking into it, and you're looking for the thing that's alive in it. And you look for the most part and you don't see something that's alive. There's an opportunity for you to step into a space and to bring certain qualities. You are animate, you're alive, there's an energy and a presence about you. But you've got to be deliberate about those things that you bring into a space. So, if I use myself as an example, I say I'm somebody who brings energy. That's one of my kind of leading traits. I'm naturally energetic. So I bring energy, and a great energy, an inspiring and an uplifting energy. That's the one. The second is I like to make people think. And so I'm somebody who's conscious about how do I engage in conversations where people are left thinking a little bit more? How do we have thought-provoking conversations? And then the third is sometimes it's just about having a bit of fun, right? We're authentic, I'm fun, I'm young. At least I think so. So how do I bring a little bit of that dynamic as well? So you've got to commit to the things you bring into these virtual platforms as well. Too many people are stepping into these platforms haphazardly, right? They switch on their camera and it looks like somebody was thrown or hit from behind, and they stumbled into this virtual place. I think let's be more deliberate about how we show up to this. And then, of course, there's very technical things that we can do to be heard on virtual platforms. I always say, your background, your ambience, your environment, says a lot as well. It's communicating alongside you. If it's cluttered and we don't even know where to focus our energies, I call that noise. I say anything that's noise is going to be a distraction and will reduce your ability to be heard, including things like this background, including things like how you present yourself, how you look, etc. This is not to say that everybody needs to be on a suit. You've got to go with what works with your brand, what aligns to your brand and to your brand story. Certainly for the most part. So it's paying attention to that. If people cannot see you, Mireille, you'll appreciate that they're going to struggle to connect and to build that relationship with you. So invest in some of the practical tools that can ensure that people are able to see you, you're visible to your audiences, etc. Invest in good quality equipment. You want to have a connection that doesn't, that's quite steady for the most part. And I know that we struggle with things like bandwidth, particularly here in Africa. And in South Africa, from time to time, we have load shedding, which is sort of intermittent switching on and off of our power supply. And so, we do have challenges, no doubt, but as much as possible, navigating around those challenges to ensure that you've got good equipment. You do, for the most part, have a sound connection. You've got visible lighting. We can hear you, we can see you, and you certainly have been mindful about what you bring into the room. So those are some of the things that I always, share with audiences when we're talking about how do we ensure that when we come onto these virtual platforms, that people hear us, that people connect with us. I've seen bad habits, Mireille. People switch off cameras. They come in, they switch off cameras. And I say, for me, that's the equivalent of walking into a boardroom and sitting under the table. and then saying you're going to present to us from under the table. If you're presenting to people, let them see you. Because part of it is this engagement. There's something around being able to connect eye to eye, to see each other. I'm bouncing off your energy as you nod, as you smile. And so as much as possible, I switch on your camera. And if you're engaging with people who are able to do that as well, ask for them to come onto camera from time to time. Part of what's been compromised, or at least we thought was compromised on these virtual platforms, was this ability to connect. And I have seen, just through employing a couple of the things I've spoken to, we can still build those connections, with people. And then, of course, Mireille, the most important one is, engage with people by sharing story. Share a story. Remember, I said you've got a story to tell. People love stories. And if you will permit me, I want to share a very short story that connects to why we. Thank you. It connects to why I believe every one of us has a story to share. Just before I left corporate, in fact, it wasn't before I left. There was a gentleman who was due to go on retirement. We'll call him Mr. Leonard. And Mr. Leonard was working in the company. This was while I was still in corporate. And he had reached that age where he was about to go on retirement. And I had been tasked as one of the people who are going to put together the farewell event. I think it was a farewell luncheon or something for him. And I remember we were told to keep this a secret, but of course we had to ensure that he would be there. And I remember, as I was walking through the office, coming upon Mr. Leonard, and he was busy packing away his things, slowly kind of packing away his things. I could see he was sort of having a deep sentimental moment. And I walked over to him. And I said, Mr. Leonard, it's been really wonderful. And I'm sure you're looking forward to your retirement. And he said, yes, Zoya, I am looking forward to my retirement. And I said to him, so be sure to stay with us until Friday, please. And he said, no, I just want to get out of here. I just want to leave the space. I don't want to come back on the Friday. And at this stage, I was stressed, thinking, oh, no, Mr. Leonard, you must come back because we have a party for you. Anyway, Mr. Leonard was resolute that he was not coming back. And eventually I spilled the beans and I said, Mr. Leonard, it's because we are actually having a party for you. And there's some gifts that we want to give to you at the party. And I'll never forget how he looked up at me and he said, I don't want your party and I don't want your gold watch or anything like that. I'm clear that my time in this place is up. I no longer want to be here. I just want to get out. I just want to leave. And that was a story. Wow. That was a story. And I'd never heard Mr. Leonard contribute in meetings. I'd never heard Mr. Leonard show up. He just used to be there and he became the quiet guy. And when he spoke to me on this day, I thought, your here is a story that for me is probably helping me to better understand why he showed up the way he did over the time that I had known him. So I truly believe that every single one of us has a story to tell. And sometimes the story is locked underneath the things we've been, the systems that have oppressed us. Sometimes the stories are locked underneath, a status quo that has nothing to do, with who I am and realizing the best version of myself. And I think the privilege of this work has been to sit with different people and to hear the most amazing stories ever.
Wow, that's a powerful story, actually. Very, very powerful. And thanks for sharing. We have a question here from Rebecca. Rebecca she's also making a statement, actually. Interesting point on the story you tell. I teach the other side of that, which is that story you telling yourself, which generally keeps them from articulating their truth. Do you focus on how one internalizes their perception of the room? I think she's making reference to what you said, just before telling the story.
So Rebecca, it's exactly that. That's often a starting point. One of the things I spoke to a little bit earlier was that sometimes, so we said there's two approaches. Sometimes it's the inward or the internal issues, and sometimes it's the external or outward issues. And part of the internal issues are the stories that we tell ourselves. I often say to people, we talk a lot about, the power of I am. And it's not just those words I am, it's what follows those words. And I think it's Joel Osteen who says this, who says the power of the words that follow I am are incredibly, we can't take the power of those words for granted. But most importantly, it's to recognize that the power of I am is at play throughout the day. So what are those things that you're saying to yourself all of the time? How do we become mindful, aware of the internal narrative? Because that contributes a great deal to the experiences that we have, to how we then show up to the things that we need to do. And in speaking in particular, people will say things like, before they've even taken to the platform, I'm meeting them for the first time, and they say things like, Zoya, I can't do this. I am not a good speaker. I am terrible at this. And I go, let's just pause for a second there. Let's go through what is that internal narrative that's playing out, and what is the impact of that in terms of, to your point, Rebecca, standing in the way of your ability to really own your truth. So 100%, we're aligned, we're on the same page.
Fantastic. And the I am is actually a very powerful, powerful statement. Sometimes we don't realize it's actually the way of manifesting what's going to happen in our life, and we don't always realize that the power that I am can have. So we have yes, so Komotso here, congratulations to you. And then Tebelo, well, what story do we have to share? And that's the bit. We need to know ourselves. We need to know our story. We need to know what we stand for, because otherwise it's difficult to tell a story. If we don't know ourselves, if we don't know what we stand for, if we don't know what we are born for. Yes, go ahead, Zoya.
Sorry, it cut there for a second, so I wasn't sure if you'd concluded the point. My apologies. So on the point of stories exactly, and what stories do we tell, I have also found that we have a tendency to want to look for stories outside of ourselves. So I want to tell, I want to find this grand story that sounds like, somebody else's story. I remember for me, and it's taken me a while to get to this point, but I remember struggling with how I don't have a story of, typical, I grew up in a poor home where we had nothing, and I had to, really work hard to get to the place where I could achieve my dream. I don't have the story of, I come from a rural village, which are typical of kind of the stories we hear coming out of our country and our continent in particular. And I wrestled with myself for a long time, feeling like my story wasn't good enough, because it wasn't one of deep poverty. It wasn't one. And I thought, is it good enough to share still? I really wrestled with this. And then eventually I realized that your story is the various experiences that you have had. And at some point, there is a nexus, there's a meeting point, even if mine is not of poverty, but maybe the story of my mother, who died of HIV/AIDS, and it's a real story, can connect to the story of somebody who grew up in a situation where it was poverty, because the themes are the same. Some of the feelings we go through could be the same. So it wasn't just about saying, look to mirror stories you've heard before. What experiences have you had, Zoya, that become your stories? What experiences of what has been your greatest joy? Where have your greatest lessons come from? What is the story of your birth? What are the things that excite you and really kind of set you on fire? What are the things you want to change in the world? All of those things contributing, to the story that Zoya has to tell. And I think for me, it was being comfortable that my story can be anything, and I don't need to feel the pressure that it needs to sound like something people have heard before, or even that it needs to sound fundamentally different. It is just my story.
And it's important to say, because there's so much that we go through. I mean, it doesn't have to, like you said, to be poverty. There's so much that we go through. There are different challenges, and sometimes different even joy that we go through, and it is a story. So it doesn't have to be something dramatic. It can also be a very positive story to set the tone that positive story exists. So any story is valid, and that's the important part of what you're saying. So we're gonna have our last break, and then get your message to everybody that is listening today. What do you want them to leave the platform with? But we'll do that after a short break, and be back for the conclusion.
Tous les souhaits, qui c'est madame en câlin, même si ça fait la peine. Elle est souffert, moi elle souffert.
So we are back. We are back with Zoya, and it has been a very insightful conversation, inspiring. I hope you've taken notes. And the next step for you is to implement or just connect with Zoya after the show to know how she can help you, to own your voice and to tell your story. But before we do that, I just want Zoya to let us know, what is the main message that you want, the audience to live with today?
I think it is, we all have something of value to contribute. I think there's too many people who second guess their value in a world that needs the diversity of thinking and perspectives and ideas. And so for me, it's to say, my hope is that you really, really can realize that you have something of value to contribute, to remember who you are, to step into that, and then to share your contributions with the world.
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate, you have greatness inside of you. You have something of value. They are a gift. You have a story, whatever the story is. Just voice it and tell the story. There's always somebody who's going to connect with this story. So it's important that you voice it. It's important that you reach out, because otherwise nobody knows. Nobody really knows your story, and you become invisible, like we've just mentioned during the show. So thank you so much, Zoya, again, for your time and for your wisdom and insight today. It has been amazing. And I just want to know, how do people connect with you if they want to bring this conversation to another level? Obviously, in 1 hour, it's difficult to talk about all the, the beautiful work and important work that you're doing. So just to make sure that, people can connect with you and follow up after the show.
So we are active on all the social media platforms. So we have a LinkedIn page. We're on Facebook. We're on, Twitter. So we're on all those social media platforms. We're on Instagram as well. That's the one way in which you can connect with us. We also have a website. So www.zoyaspeaks.co.za. So we also have a website, and you can absolutely go onto our website. We do have a form you can input there if you're wanting to reach out to us for some of the services that we offer. And then I will also just forward an email address. If you're comfortable with that, you can pop us an email at info@zoyaspeaks.co.za, and we'll respond to you there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So do reach out. There's the website here. So www.zoyaspeaks.co.za. The email is info@zoyaspeaks.co.za, and then you can find Zoya and her team all over the social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Please make sure you connect, because this is an important subject, and I think you need to tell your story. Like we said, your story matter. Your story matter, and it's gonna be part of you going to the next level of your
100%. Thank you
greatness.
so
And this show is all
much.
about greatness. So start with your story, start with learning, who you are, and sharing your story, and you'll see greatness flowing into your life. So that's all we have for you today. I'm going to be back with another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show later today. We're gonna have we're going to the US later, and we're gonna have Sabrina. Sabrina is gonna talk about growing ageless financially. So we're going to talk about finance and also health. So don't leave. Come in 1 hour. I will be back with Sabrina, and it has been an amazing hour of greatness. And I'm really blessed that you've been able to grace the platform of the Greatness Engineering Hour show. So until now, I just want to bless everybody who have been part of the show, and everyone who's gonna watch the replay. And I will be back in 1 hour, so don't go anywhere. I'm coming back. So take care, and thank you again, Zoya, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Mireille, for the platform. Thank you to all of those who gave us their time and shared some of their contributions. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.